What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me tonight, it's Wednesday. You know what that means. Damian Dabrowski. What's up, Damian?
Doing good, Kyle. My baseball teams are going up in flames this week, so it looks like it's going to be all football from here on out.
All right. It's an interesting time for sure. Those of you still playing fantasy baseball, props to you. I'm one of those crazy people trying to win a title, but we're here to talk some fantasy football, and to help us do it, it's our good buddy from Draftsharks. It's Jared Smola. What's up, Jared?
What's up, guys? It's always all football for me, except maybe a little bit of fantasy golf every once in a while.
Yeah, of course, you got to dabble that in every once in a while and keep everybody on their toes. Guys, we are approaching the sweet spot of redraft season. I know personally I have my big home league draft that I've had this league. I think we're coming up on a decade. We always do we'll rent a house or something and have like a big draft weekend. Very excited. Jared, do you have like a home league that you kind of, do the old traditional, go to the house, get the big board with all the stickers and do the old school draft, or are you just online all the time?
No, I love the home leagues. I love the in-person drafts. I got my start in fantasy football when I was like 8 years old. Yeah. My uncle had a league with his buddies, and one of the guys dropped out. So last minute he picked me up, and I drafted, and that's sort of how I got going in fantasy. So I'm still in that league too. It's going on like year 20 now.
Nice. Yeah, I have one of those. I was like 12 or 13, played with a bunch of my mom's coworkers, and did pretty well the first couple of years, and they weren't very happy about a little kid coming in and taking over their league, but that's what makes fantasy football fun. Damian, what about you? You got a league with your buddies? You're planning on doing a whole draft and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I got two. I got like a home league from high school, and then I got another one from college. So the college one's a dynasty, which is a little weird just because, it's fun, but it's like we don't get the draft anymore. It's just a rookie draft, which is cool, but it's like you don't have the same experience. And then, the high school one's great, but it's an auction, and it's like, unless you go all out and like get like an actual auctioneer, it gets a little messy when you try to do it in person. So like the hybrid is basically we still try to get, whatever, like 8 of the 12 guys, and just we still do it from our laptops, but we kind of get together, still get to, heckle a little bit and make it a little more interesting than if we were just all sitting at home.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, like, it seems like a lot of people are trying to get away from the draft, but I think that's my favorite part. Like, 5 hours, 6 hours, I know it's a long time, but it's my favorite part. You get to hang out with all your buddies. You get to make fun of people taking, bad players or players that have already been drafted, have a few beers, order a pizza, whatever, make a whole day out of it, make a whole weekend out of it. That's the best part about fantasy football for me.
Yeah.
Damian.
Well, also the MFL. That's why those things got so popular. Yeah. Because it's like everybody loves drafting, but it's like you don't want to manage 20 leagues every year. So it's like, and the thing is with the slow drafts, it can get annoying when people are on the clock for like 6 hours every time. But at the same time, it's like you can literally start one, like the first week of the preseason, and just you'll have a draft going in the background literally until like opening, until kickoff. So that's always fun. Help you get through the day at work.
Absolutely, and I think that's a perfect segue into our new sponsor, PlayDraft. PlayDraft.com/fakepigskin. Go there, deposit $5. You'll get a free $3 on top of that. Plus, you get Fake Pigskin Elite service all year long. It's our new premium content, rankings, DFS, all kinds of good stuff behind the paywall. $5 for a whole year. You can't beat that. I just signed up at PlayDraft today myself. It's a lot of fun. Damian's talking about best ball formats, and everybody loves drafting and may not want to have the hassle of managing 20 teams like he said. So play draft's a great way. You do some best ball, have a good cash prize waiting for you at the end, and hopefully we can be a helpful getting you paid and helping you win. So make sure you go to playdraft.com/fakepigskin, sign up. And have some fun, and they'll be there all season long for DFS as well, so make sure you check that out. Guys, I want to talk some rookies today before we jump into our AFC North preview. There's some hype trains getting rolling. Obviously, every year there's a few rookies that make their mark and become real factors. Obviously, we've talked about how tight ends are usually slow, so it's not usually them, but there's usually a running back, a receiver who makes an instant impact. And I want to talk about a few names, and the guy that's kind of made me think of this is Kenny Golladay. Obviously, a guy that has had a little bit of a buzz coming into the offseason. Anquan Bolden's gone in Detroit. The Lions are looking for a big physical receiver. In steps Kenny Golladay. Now, I don't know. He's running with the ones. His ADP has already jumped around in the last week. Jared, I like the kid. I think there's a lot of talent there. Obviously, Matthew Stafford's a guy who's shown the ability to throw to a big presence in the end zone. But does this have a little Tajay Sharp vibe? Stealing that from Alex Galhar of NFL.com. It feels like we might get a little running away with this, and he becomes a guy that goes a little too early for most people's liking.
Yeah, I could definitely see it going that way. I mean, we'll see. If he's going in the 13th round, fine. I've seen him go as early as the 7th round, and that's obviously crazy. I mean, he just started running with the first team in practice today. Yeah. Those 2 touchdowns in the preseason opener came with the backups. And I do think Golladay will end up being the number 3 wideout in Detroit. But I'm not sure that role will be enough for him to be like a weekly fantasy guy in lineup setting leagues. I think he's a better pick in best ball leagues where you just maybe get a few touchdowns out of him.
Yeah, I mean, I added him in the Scott Fish Bowl, one of my last picks, so I was really happy to have him. But, I'm 100% with you. I mean, if you look at that team, obviously Golden Tate will be 1. Theo Riddick, Eric Ebron, Marvin Jones. He's at best 3, maybe 4. If Jones goes down, maybe he gets a little bit of a boost. But even then, it feels really aggressive, especially, you're talking about him going in single-digit rounds. I mean, that's just bananas, Damian.
Yeah, I can't see taking him that high, but I'm certainly intrigued. I think, I guess the Tajay Sharp comparison, maybe that's true. I think it's tough to make that just because I think these offenses, comparing the Lions to the Titans, are so different. The Lions aren't a great running team, so I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity in the passing game, and the fact that, aside from Golden Tate, there's not really many pieces you feel great about. I mean, we know, Theo Riddick's going to get his usual third down work, but we don't know what's going to happen with Ebron. Marvin Jones was, he was so hot to start the year, but he had plenty of games where he would go, 2 for 17 or 3 for 28. So there's definitely going to be opportunity if Golladay can kind of keep this up. 6'4", 215, that's prototypical wide receiver 1 size. So I do like that. Obviously a very productive college player. Didn't jump off the page of the combine, but certainly, did well enough where I don't think there's a lot of concerns that he's athletic enough to play at this level. So I don't know if the Lions are going to have exactly enough offensive volume to support these guys, and he's not going to be a consistent player. But I think it's worth taking a flyer late, just because I do think there's more of a plausible shot for him to become a wide receiver, let's say 2, at least in that offense, than there are for most other rookies or receivers going that late.
Yeah, I mean, if you get him in double-digit rounds, especially if there's any sort of keeper or dynasty incentive, obviously I love it. Like in my home league that I'm drafting, we get to keep any player taken after round 7. So he's definitely on my short list of guys that I'll be looking at in the double-digit rounds, hoping that he becomes something and going into next season have a great value. But if you're drafting him in the single-digit rounds and you expect him to be a legit difference maker, for the majority of the season, I think that's a little far-fetched, and I think you'll end up cutting him for the hot waiver claim. And if he does become something, it'll be likely be on somebody else's roster. Jared, are you looking at any rookies that think could have an impact in year 1?
I mean, beyond the obvious top guys, I'm excited about D'Angelo Henderson in Denver. He was a guy he was one of my favorite players to watch in this rookie class at any position. He's sort of like a Ray Rice type build. He's only 5'7", but he's 208 pounds, so he has some size to him. He topped 220 carries twice at Coastal Carolina. Left school with the 6.4 yards per carry average. Did some stuff in the passing game too. And I think the best thing working in his favor is that Broncos backfield is sort of unsettled. I don't think Jamal Charles has much left in the tank. C.J. Anderson has had, an 8-game stretch of strong play, and besides that, he's sort of disappointed. Devontae Booker was disappointing as a rookie last year. So I think, there's some names for Henderson to climb over, but I think he's capable of making an impact at some point this season.
Yeah, I like that call quite a bit. Obviously, it is muddled behind C.J. Anderson, who has an injury history. Booker's dealing with the wrist injury. He's expected to be back early in the season, but if that's week 2, week 3, week 4, maybe Henderson grabs that kind of reserve role. And I loved watching Jamal Charles in Kansas City, but I don't know that it's there anymore. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't end up making the team at all. Obviously Ryan Matthews is still floating around. There could be some other guys that end up getting cut and kind of entering that situation, assuming they move on from Charles and whatnot. But definitely a name I'm keeping an eye on. Jared, are you drafting him in upcoming drafts, or is he kind of just a watch list guy? If things kind of shake out the way it could, then he becomes the guy you're running to the waiver wire to pick up?
Yeah, he's probably a watch list guy unless your draft's going 20 plus rounds. Then I think he might be worth a look at the very end.
Yeah, and best ball, that's not a terrible way to look, especially don't draft any of the Denver guys. Draft him and hope he ends up becoming something. Damian, what about you? Do you have a rookie you're looking at as a guy you think could, make a legit impact in year one outside of the Dalvin Cooks, Leonard Fournettes, the big dogs that Joe Mixon, the guys going in the top 4 or 5 rounds?
Yeah, so I've been getting a lot of Kareem Hunt in some of the earlier MFLs I've been doing. The price on him's kind of I thought it was going up a lot. There was a lot of hype kind of going into the preseason, and then it kind of stalled out a little bit. And I think right now you can still get him at a pretty good bargain. I think if you can get him, I think I got him as the 38th running back off the board. But if you can get him outside that top 30, top 35, I think it's worth taking the shot just because, if you look back the past couple of seasons, Andy Reid offenses are just so conducive to running back success. Obviously Jamal Charles was a great player, but then you look at basically – once he started getting hurt, anybody that would fill in for him, whether it was Spencer Ware, whether it was Niall Davis for a bit, Sharkandrick West, not really household names, but they became fantasy assets, and they were guys we wanted to add just because between the catches out of the backfield and kind of the run blocking scheme they have, it's an easy path to success, even if you're not the most talented guy. And I think with Hunt, he actually is a pretty talented guy. I know, playing in the MAC maybe with kind of the high-powered offenses there, you kind of those stats get taken with a grain of salt, I think, by a lot of NFL evaluators, and maybe justifiably so. But still, I think another guy that did fairly well at the combine.
Yeah,
complete back.
I like Hunt quite a bit. I like Hunt quite a bit. Obviously, he has that 3-down ability. Are you drafting him instead of drafting Spencer Ware? Are you trying to get both? Kind of, what's your game plan heading into drafts with that backfield?
I don't want to get both. I don't think I'm not a big handcuff guy to begin with, and I don't think while if Ware gets overtaken or if he gets hurt, I think it's pretty clear that Hunt is the guy. The confidence I have in Hunt makes me just not want to waste a pick on Ware because Ware is still going to go earlier. So I'd rather just wait a little bit. And while we kind of all in on Ware last season, he never really kind of progressed as the year went on. He kind of got nicked up. He never became that guy who was going to get 18, 20 carries a game. It seemed like the Chiefs weren't ready to commit to him. And I'm not saying that, Hunt is going to be getting 20 touches a game either, even if he does become kind of their lead back. But as we saw with Charles, it's an offense that kind of lends itself to big plays, and you don't necessarily need the same volume as you would in another system to be productive.
Yeah, and I like the fact that if Hunt does get the majority of the work, he's obviously got that pass catching ability. So it's not like they're going to bring him off the field for Sharkandrick West, or they'd have to. Obviously, like you said, he'll probably not see all of the work, but if he does get that lead back role, it could be definitely interesting. Jared, what about you? Are you in on Kareem Hunt, or are you team Spencer Ware, or are you just trying to avoid this backfield?
I'm not avoiding it because, like Damian said, Andy Reid produces strong fantasy running backs. He's produced a top 20 PPR back in 14 out of his 18 seasons as a head coach. And I like Kareem Hunt as a prospect. He just has some catching up to do at this point. He only played 1 snap with the starters in that first preseason game. I believe Spencer Ware played 18. So, Ware's clearly the guy for now. I think Hunt could still make a move, but this point, I think, Ware's the better bet. Whether he's the better bet at his ADP because he's going, 3, 4, 5 rounds earlier, that's debatable.
Yeah, and I think preseason week 2, week 3 are going to be pivotal weeks. You obviously want to keep an eye on those snap counts. Nathan Janke over at Pro Football Focus is a great follow. Has a lot of the snap count information that it's really useful. You can see who's running with the ones. You can see who's on the on the field in certain situations, and it's really good stuff to dive into. All right, guys, speaking of diving in, let's dive into the AFC North, and we'll start with those Cincinnati Bengals. They obviously brought in Joe Mixon, who's currently going in the 4th round. As high as the 3rd round, people are very, very high on him. Jeremy Hill is still there. Gio Bernard is running around in practice, looks, like his former self. Jared, where do you come down on this backfield, and kind of what pieces are you targeting in your drafts?
Yeah, I mean, I want to like Joe Mixon, but I think for starters, the offensive line is problematic after losing 2 of their top guys in Kevin Zeitler and Andrew Whitworth in free agency. You have Jeremy Hill, who, as much as he struggled, outside the opponent's 10-yard line, he's been really good around the goal line. So I think he could hang on to some of the short yardage stuff. And then Gio Bernard has been effective in the passing game. So I'm not sure Mixon's going to get enough touches, especially out of the gate, to be worth, a 3rd, 4th round pick. He definitely has the upside to, smash that draft cost, but there's some risk involved with him too, I think.
100%. I mean, yeah, he has, he can be just as good or better than Bernard in the passing game. He can be more effective between the tackles than Jeremy Hill. But it's also Marvin Lewis. We're also talking about, like you said, Jeremy Hill's been really good in the red zone. If Jeremy Hill's effective on 3rd downs, if he's scoring those touchdowns, if Gio Bernard is, even a thing on passing downs, all of a sudden, Joe Mixon's upside is severely limited. I still like Hill. I think he can be, especially in standard leagues, I think he has that, 8, 9, 10 touchdown type upside, assuming he's the guy for the majority of the year. Obviously, if he gets replaced midseason, you can drop him and move on. But, he's going in double-digit rounds. I like that value all day. Damian, what about you? Are you taking Mixon at his price, or do you have some reservations?
No, not at all. I think, it's come down a little bit, but I mean, I want to say a month ago I saw him go late 2nd, early 3rd in a couple drafts, and I just can't imagine taking a guy there that essentially would need 2 players to get hurt to have a shot at being, a 20-touch guy. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a weird situation because I do love his skill set in terms of his versatility. Obviously, he kind of jumps off the page at you if you look at his tape. But at the same time, you kind of have to weigh the fact that, okay, the Bengals obviously took him in the 2nd round when they had a lot of other needs they could have addressed with that pick. So they clearly believe in him. And you almost want to say that, okay, if they're not going to use him, why did they take him so early when they had 2 other, competent backs on the roster? But like Jared said, between Hill at the goal line and in short yardage and Bernard on passing downs on 3rd down, he's basically relegated to being a between the 20s early down guy. And even there, I don't think he's going to be getting, all of that work. It's still going to take him a while to, kind of pick up the playbook and get in sync with this offense. And I mean, the Bengals have high expectations. It's going to be, on one hand, they're going to want his explosiveness, but on the other hand, they're not going to, basically sit back and let him kind of go through, some growing pains because they're a team that's ready to win now. So, if he can't handle the blocking assignments or, pick up the playbook, then Bernard and Hill have shown that they're competent players and have done that in the past. So just that lack of upside makes me not comfortable taking him really anywhere inside the first 5 rounds.
Yeah, and honestly,
Andy,
go ahead.
Andy Dalton played 1 drive in that first preseason game, and Jeremy Hill had 6 carries on that drive. Joe Mixon had only 1, and Hill got both of the red zone carries. So that sort of tells you where the backfield is at right now, at least.
That feels like we'll see that at least for the start of the season. Whether that changes early, I mean, Jeremy Hill as a rookie ended up taking over and having a monster fantasy season. So could Mixon do that? Absolutely. Would I bet on it? I don't know that I would. Let's talk about the pass catchers because there's a lot to like there, including A.J. Green, who was on pace to be the wide receiver 1, was having a monster season, had 100 targets through 10 games, 66 catches, 964 yards, only 4 touchdowns. But, This is a guy that had double-digit touchdowns 3 of the previous 4 seasons. Jared, obviously he's coming off injury, but does he vault kind of back into that elite tier for you? And, is he where does he sit behind the big 3 receivers?
Yeah, Green's my wide receiver 4, pretty clearly behind, the big 3. He's done it for a while now. He's had a bunch of top 12 fantasy seasons. His full season pace before his injury last year would have led all wide receivers in both PPR and non-PPR points. I think Green is still in his prime. I think this Bengals offense has a chance to be really good. And I still think Green's going to be, the focal point of the offense. I think someone like John Ross, he's not going to hog a bunch of targets and take volume away from Green. He's just going to, if anything, pull some defensive attention away from AJ Green. So I think the addition of John Ross only helps.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. In terms of real football, John Ross is great. In terms of fantasy, I'm not a huge fan, especially in year 1. But yeah, he's going to pull the top off the defense, going to keep those safeties, attention. It's going to open up room for the running game. It's going to open up for Tyler Eifert, who we'll get to in a little bit. But Damian, AJ Green, is he, kind of that top 4, top 5 receiver for you, and you expect him to kind of just rebound to the elite guy that he's always been?
Yep, I'm just like Jared. I have him as wide receiver 4. Right after the big 3 before Mike Evans. And I think the thing for me now is with some of the running back news we've had, in the past week or so. I think once you get behind David Johnson and LeVeon Bell, I'm taking Green and even Mike Evans before any of the other running backs. Obviously Zeke with the suspension, but I'm also taking those guys now. Before Freeman, before Gordon, before Ajayi. I just feel more comfortable. Obviously in PPR, but even in standard, I just feel more comfortable in their production, and I think there's less risk than there is with some of those running backs.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I know everyone sees the small number of running backs and the receivers you can get later, but the consistency and the production that comes from an elite receiver in the first round, that's where I go almost all the time. Jared, quickly, Ezekiel Elliott, where are you comfortable taking him if you're drafting, say, this weekend and he still has a 6-game suspension?
Yeah, I haven't, come across that opportunity yet, but I think in like the late 2nd, early 3rd round is when I'd start to consider him. And part of it is because when I do drafts and I get to that spot, there's no one I really like. I think you're looking at, Todd Gurley, Demaryius Thomas, Brandon Cooks. So I like Cooks, but, I think, Zeke might make more sense there depending on format. And I think it depends, too, how confident you are in your ability to pick out values later on in your draft. And if you're in a weaker draft with, weaker competition, I think you can take a shot on Zeke. If you're in a stronger draft and you don't think you're going to be able to, pluck those values late in the draft, it might not make as much sense.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect spot, especially, if you have one of those first 2 picks, you get Lev Bell, you get David Johnson, and then you grab Zeke. Like I said, I don't typically start running back heavy, but that would be a situation I'd be interested. Like, Jared, would you take Gronk or would you take Zeke?
Gronk.
I'd take Zeke. What about you, Damian?
Oh, definitely Gronk. I mean, I'm way lower on Zeke than I think both of you guys. I can't see taking him in the first 3 rounds. I think middle of the 4th maybe is where I look at it, just because, it's half your season.
Yeah.
Like I said, people, you kind of think of it as a 16-game season because that's what it is in the NFL. But in fantasy, it's only 13 weeks, and you add in that bye week that he has after the suspension. I'm not – maybe if it's an MFL and, I know that, they're going to pick the best players for you every week. I just have to draft them. If I do that, then I'm okay with it because, I know that if I kind of pick guys with some upside, I'll get their best weeks. But if you're setting that lineup every week, I definitely don't have the confidence between, guys getting hurt, things like that. I can't imagine kind of losing out on that production and then he comes back and you're 1 and 5. And it's like, at that point, it doesn't really matter what he does. You're already out of it. And I can't see starting so far kind of behind the 8 ball before, the first game is even played.
Yeah, again, it depends how confident you are in your ability to build, a team behind him that you think can compete for those first 6 games. If you can go 3-3 there, I think you're okay. I just think taking, Zeke in, say, the 3rd round and then Darren McFadden in the 10th round, I think those 2 guys combined are probably going to give you, top 8, maybe even top 5 running back production.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so I mean together for sure, but I guess it's also if you have to be pretty confident that you can get McFadden, and I think
Right.
now it's kind of like there's probably going to be at least one guy in every league that's going to be like, oh well, it's the Cowboys, I'm just going to get McFadden, and he's basically going to be 80% of Zeke for the first 6 weeks, and Zeke, you would have had to take in the top 5, and McFadden, you can get in the 7th round. So it's in an auction, I can definitely see that because you kind of control, who you get essentially. But in a draft, it could be tough if you kind of bank on that, and then it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I mean his ADP is climbing. He was in the outside the 13th round. Now he's up into the 9th, heading up into the 8th. Like I'm not taking Darren McFadden there. I there could be a mess. I do like the idea of taking Zeke and then getting Robert Kelly, Jacques Rogers, some of those kind of guys. I don't mind missing games early. It's the later ones when it becomes a bigger mess. Like early, I feel like I have Terrence West, Robert Kelly, Jacques Rogers. I feel like those guys will get the bulk for the first couple of games. What happens after that, when all the guys return and stuff, that could keep things interesting. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a gamble. I would highly recommend doing some mock drafts, taking Zeke at that turn, and seeing how your team ends up, and seeing if you feel, like the way it looks, and if you're comfortable kind of where you're sitting. Let's talk about the rest of the pass catchers in Cincinnati. We already hit on Ross. Brandon LaFell was kind of a thing, no matter what Damian wants to say. Tyler Boyd's still there. Jared, are any of these guys, interesting to you in fantasy leagues other than, super deep leagues?
No, not for me. I think LaFell was a thing last year because Tyler Eifert missed 8 games, AJ Green missed 6 games, Gio Bernard missed 6 games, and there was no John Ross there. It was basically LaFell and Boyd. That was what was left. So
Yeah.
I'm not interested. I don't think there's enough firepower here to support passing game options behind Green and Eifert.
Yeah. And we'll get to Dalton and our excitement for him in a second, but I think we're all in agreement there, right, Damian?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Let's talk about Tyler Eifert, a guy that had the one massive touchdown season. Outside of that, has been a lot of injuries. I guess, Jared, where are you at with Tyler Eifert? And is he a guy that, if you're in the end of the 6th, the beginning of the 7th, you're comfortable taking?
No, I'm not an Eifert guy. I don't like the risk-reward equation for him, I guess. He might be the biggest injury risk at tight end, even bigger than Rob Gronkowski, Jordan Reed. Eifert's missed 27 games over the past 4 seasons now. So you have that. And then even when he's on the field, I think he's pretty touchdown dependent. Since 2013, he's 4th among tight ends in touchdowns per game, but he's only 18th in yards per game and 20th in catches per game. So he's not even a tight end 1 as far as those two stats go. So he's sort of a touchdown or bust guy, and he does have the big touchdown upside, but again, you factor in the injury risk, and I'm not interested at his cost.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us play almost primarily PPR leagues, and you need those yards, you need those catches on a week-to-week basis. Obviously, the touchdowns are nice, but he really needs to have double-digit touchdowns or close to it to be worthy of kind of where he's going. Damian, or what about you? Are you a Tyler Eifert guy?
No, not for fantasy. Just because, like Jared said, the touchdowns are great, but he doesn't really do much between the 20s. If he doesn't score, he's not going to get you a lot, and he's always at a risk of getting hurt. And usually when he does, it's not like it's a game-to-game thing. It's he's out 4, 5, 6 weeks. So I don't think the volume's going to be here. So unless I'm getting Gronk, pretty much I'm waiting on tight end.
Yeah, that's kind of my way, and like I said, I take Zeke over Gronk, so I probably won't own any Gronk anywhere. Let's talk about the Red Rifle. Let's talk about Mr. Andy Dalton. Jared, this guy is going off the board late, end of the 11th, start of the 12th. Nobody seems to want him except for maybe you.
Oh hell yeah! I'll take Dalton in every draft. I'll go up into the 9th, 10th round to make sure I get him a lot of times. He finished 11th among quarterbacks in fantasy points last year, despite all those injuries around him. So I think if you get better health from AJ Green, Tyler Eifert, they add John Ross, they add Joe Mixon, who we talked about, is a solid pass catcher out of the backfield. And then Dalton gives you some sneaky rushing upside too. I know you wouldn't expect it looking at him, but he gives you 200, 250 yards a season and a few touchdowns on the ground. So I think he's a strong bet for another top 12 fantasy season.
Yeah, I mean, since 2012, 4 rushing touchdowns, 2, 4, 3, and 4 rushing touchdowns. So I mean that's that little bit means a huge difference on a week-to-week basis. I mean, and if you're in a 4-point passing touchdown league, like there's even another reason to like him a little bit more, to bump him up. 4,200 yards last year without AJ Green. He obviously in 2013 when he was one of the best fantasy quarterbacks, 4,200 yards, almost 4,300 yards. Has that 30 touchdown potential with all these weapons. I'm 100% with you. I'm grabbing him late, and I'm very happy to do so. What about you, Damian?
Yeah, I think he's a polarizing player just because for kind of a casual fantasy player, a casual football fan, it's kind of hard to separate the public perception of the Bengals, which is generally just them losing on Saturday afternoon in the first playoff game every year, 13-10 to the Texans every year, pretty much. But it's easy to forget that Dalton's basically, he was a starter from first game of his rookie season, and he's basically led this team to double-digit wins every season since. Consistently a guy that's going to get at least 25 touchdowns, 3,500 yards, probably closer to 4,000 now with how much more they're throwing. And you kind of remember the mistakes he makes, but you forget. It's almost kind of a little to a lesser extent what happened with Tony Romo, where everybody just thought of him as this big choker who would throw costly interceptions, and then it turned out that he had one of the best fourth quarter quarterback ratings out of anybody over the last 10 seasons. So not saying Dalton's there yet, but I do think that he's extremely underrated given how consistent he is and how many weapons that offense has this season.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot to like, and where he's going among Dak Prescott, among Carson Wentz, among Carson Palmer, like Phil Rivers, like I would take Andy Dalton in that situation almost every time. Let's head up north and over to Cleveland, and let's talk about those Browns. There's a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position. Deshaun Kaiser's obviously looked amazing in his preseason debut. Cody Kessler's still there. He got the start. Jared, in terms of the running backs, in terms of the receivers, does it matter who's under center for you in terms of their fantasy potential?
I think Kaiser just brings, kind of raises the ceiling on the entire offense, and he might lower the floor too because he is a rookie. He's probably going to be more consistent, but just with his big arm, that obviously helps the wide receivers. I think his rushing ability helps the running backs. We've seen running backs perform better with athletic, mobile quarterbacks. So I'd like to see Kaiser under center, and I sort of think it's heading that way.
I'd love to see that. I've been beating the drum all off season. I love Deshaun Kaiser. He was actually going to be my rookie, but I figured since we're going to talk about the Browns, we should definitely save him. Damian, what about you? Does it matter for you? I mean, obviously, Kessler might be more consistent, like Jared said, but I think, in terms of opening up everything and actually getting monster season from one of these receivers, I think Kaiser might be the best bet.
I guess. I mean, I think if you're looking at it from a quarterback perspective and you had to, start one of these guys, I do think Kaiser is probably more likely to be a more productive fantasy player. But in terms of the other pieces on this offense, I'm not saying Kessler's more talented. I don't think he is, and I don't think he has the same upside. But I feel like he can do kind of what we expected from Josh McCown, the past couple of seasons in situations where he started, where we never thought he was going to, become anything special, but he was pretty good. Or Brian Hoyer's another kind of name like that can keep the offense moving, can keep it going. And it's a small sample size for Kessler, but I think if I own some of the other pieces on this offense, I'd actually prefer Kessler, at least at the start of the season, just because I do think the learning curve for Kaiser is going to be pretty steep, given that he didn't exactly have the most experience in college, between kind of having to go back and forth with Malik Zaire there.
Yeah, I know there's like Todd McShay was talking about quarterbacks with, most of them that have like less than 25 starts in college end up doing really poorly at the next level. But I have high expectations for Kaiser. I do want to see, over the next couple weeks. I think, there's probably still a good shot that Kessler starts the first couple of games and then they switch. But
See, I think Kessler is almost out of this competition, guys. Just from what I've been reading, it's been Brock and it's been Kaiser getting the first team reps in camp. And I know Brock's going to start the second preseason game, and then Kaiser's going to be the number 2 guy in, and then it's going to be Kessler coming in 3. So just from what I've been reading out of the Browns camp, it sort of seems like it's Brock versus Kaiser at this point.
Oh my God.
I legitimately forgot that Brock was on the Browns. I was like looking at the rundown, and I was like, what about, is Osweiler still there? Like, and then that report,
there.
Yeah, that report came out that like the Dolphins were interested in him, and the Browns were like, nope, he's untouchable. He's on the no trade list.
I do got to give him credit. He did have that one pass to Kenny Britt, like right in the in the end zone, back corner. If Kenny Britt drags his toes, if it's a regular season game, it's probably a touchdown. So weirder things have happened, but it feels like everybody knows Brock sucks. So when they cut Brock and let Kaiser be the starter week 1, nobody will care, and Kessler's the safety guy, who can be a backups, if they need. I don't know, but
the only thing I'll say, Kyle, is Brock is probably the most like giftable quarterback we have. So if he gets cut, that's gonna be a big detriment to kind of my gift selection for this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean between Brock going away and Jeff Fisher, like it's gonna be a rough season, but we'll always have Eli Manning, so we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the running game. Obviously, in the preseason opener, Joel Bitonio and Cameron Irving. Even though Cameron Irving's not great, I think he had back-to-back false starts on like the first drive, but
not very good in quotation marks. Not very good as you put it on.
But obviously Crowell is a guy that people are getting excited about. Had a really nice season last year. Jared, those offensive linemen, even as we kind of joke about Cam Irving, they kind of need to be there for this running game to kind of get to the level we want it to be, right?
Yeah, that's a concern. Something I'm keeping an eye on. I think that was one of the biggest arguments in favor of Crowell this summer is just that Cleveland beefed up their offensive line in free agency. It really looked like a top 5 unit. It still does when those guys are healthy. For Crowell, though, I would say that the offensive line was bad last year. They were 28th in Football Outsiders adjusted line yards, and Crow still finished 14th among running backs in PPR points. So I think even if the O-line doesn't take a big step forward, he's still a guy who can, give you that RB2 production at least.
Yeah, and, he's going in kind of the middle of the third in PPR, he's going with Christian McCaffrey, Marshawn Lynch, Ty Montgomery, Dalvin Cook. It feels kind of like the right range. Jared, are you comfortable taking him there?
Yeah, and I have taken him, mid to late third a few times. I'm a big fan of his talent. And the other thing, too, is I think he's going to do more pass-catching stuff than people think. He caught, I think it was 40 balls last year. Actually out-targeted Duke Johnson 34-27 over the second half of the last season. So I think Crowell's a guy who, is probably going to get 250 touches, and there's just not that many running backs that you can say that about.
Yeah, and, with the talk of Duke Johnson playing slot receiver, I think that shows that the Browns plan on having Crowell behind the quarterback most of the season, being involved in the third down passing at work, and to your point, getting all those touches. I was gonna say give me Ty Monty, but he's dealing with a soft tissue injury. Those are always scary, and I like Dalvin Cook a lot, but it feels like a good range. Damian, what about you? You comfortable taking Crowell kind of at the end of the third?
Yeah, if it comes to that, I think the Browns have to be better than they were last year, just kind of by sheer regression and bringing in some more pieces. And I guess the concern here is that we almost kind of were. I guess if we look at the stats for Crowell last year, and like Jared said, there's a lot of good things there in terms of you don't realize how involved he was in the passing game, and the fact that he was fairly efficient. It was just a question of volume and the Browns being down so quickly and so often that he wasn't able to get those 20 carry games that we generally see for most other lead backs. But at the same time, if he keeps getting pushed up and we're at a point where we're taking it's still a Browns running back, and I don't want to get kind of too invested in this Browns offense, regardless of how much better we think they're going to be. So late third maybe, but I think if he starts getting pushed up to kind of early third, I'm probably out on him, and I'm just going to take another receiver.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head's at. Let's talk about the pass catchers. And Jared, Corey Coleman obviously had that big game before getting injured. Kenny Britt was 1,000-yard receiver with the Rams with Case Keenum and Jared Goff. Who are you more willing to own this year if you're adding a Browns pass catcher?
Yeah, I'm warming up to Corey Coleman because I loved him coming out of school, and he's finally strung together, at least a couple weeks of good health here, which I think helps. But I'm still a Kenny Britt guy. I think he was one of the more impressive wide receivers last year when you consider, the situation he was in. He was on a Rams offense that finished dead last in scoring. They were 31st in passing yards, and Britt still managed to finish 26th among wide receivers in PPR points. And then the Browns go out and sign him to a pretty big deal in free agency. He got about $32 million over 4 years. So, and then there's the cost with him. He's going in the 9th, 10th round as wide receiver 47. I think he's a virtual lock as long as he stays healthy to crush that price tag.
It's pretty crazy. I'm looking at ADP on Fantasy Football Calculator, and right now, Corey Coleman and Kenny Britt are both going at the end of the 10th, almost like, basically one wide receiver spot from the other one. It's pretty insane. They're kind of almost like they're, Britt's gone up a little bit, Coleman's come down a little bit, and they're almost at the exact same pick. Damian, what about you? If you're looking at a receiver kind of in that range, is it Britt? Is it Coleman? Is it situation dependent?
Honestly, if I have to choose between the two, I do like Britt just because he's shown us that he can be a productive player without a good quarterback or a good offense for that matter. But again, I just think that what I kind of said with Crowell about not really wanting to be proactive about getting involved in the Browns offense here, I'm not going to be looking to add one of these guys. I'd much rather take a lesser option on a much better offense and hope that whether through injury or through just a shifting on the depth chart, that guy gets an opportunity, then I am hoping that, the Browns kind of because I can still see a situation where if Kaiser isn't picking things up and Kessler obviously isn't going to be anything great, that, this can be a situation where the Browns, throw 15 touchdowns as a team this year.
Yeah. I think there's a handful, either the Niners, I think the Jets, the Browns, obviously. There's a few teams, the Bears, that could be very, very sparse touchdown production from the quarterback position. Let's head over to Baltimore and talk about the Ravens. A lot going on there. Obviously Kenneth Dixon got suspended and then ended up getting injured. He's out for the rest of the season. Terrence West is there. Danny Woodhead is there. Jared, it feels like a pretty good marriage of those two players' skill sets. How do you see this running back position kind of shaken out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big Terrence West fan, but as the backfield stands right now, it's sort of tough to see him not getting 200-plus carries because I don't think Danny Woodhead's going to see more than 100 or so. He's never done that in his career. I think his career high is 106 carries. Now he's 32 years old, coming off a torn ACL, so I think he's going to be in that 100 range, and that leaves 200 to 250 for Terrence West. And if he gets that type of workload, it would be tough for him to not, finish as at least a, top 30 running back. I would say, though, that, Baltimore could easily add someone else here. Ryan Matthews just got released by the Eagles. I think he could be a possibility there.
Yeah, and if they do add somebody, it kind of throws a wrench in the plan. But Terrence West in the 8th round, I'll take that value all day long because, as you mentioned, he's getting 200, 250 touches. He showed flashes of being able to be a decent enough runner. I mean, especially he could, he's an excellent guy to have as kind of your Zeke replacement, assuming nothing happens. And then, he could potentially be a guy you play with Zeke when he returns. Damian, what about you? You in on Terrence West? You in on Danny Woodhead? How do you kind of see this backfield shaking out?
I think I've generally been a little bit lower on Woodhead than you guys and probably most people. So by kind of byproduct of that, I've been in on West, and that was before kind of even the some of the news broke that bumped him up. But I just think again, it's not a huge upside play, but I know that the Ravens are going to run partly because Flacco's just not a very effective passer. The concern is kind of with the with his injury situation and stuff. We could also kind of be in a situation where this offense just isn't moving the ball very well, at least in the first quarter of the season or so. At which point it may just be tough for West to kind of get a lot of opportunities. But he's another guy that kind of like Crowell. I think he's actually a little bit more involved in the passing game than you would think, and it might be a situation where they don't want to be, every time Woodhead is on the field, they're throwing, because that's just going to make him too predictable. So I think there's going to be scenarios where they do get the ball to West. So I think if you can have him, I mean, obviously, ideally, if it's a situation where you draft seek, but I think in general, if you can get him as your third running back, basically have him as a flex and be able to slide him up as an RB2, depending on injuries or bye weeks, I think that you're going to be in a pretty good spot with that.
Yeah, or if you're a Doug Martin fan, he's another guy that you could draft Terrence West and have at least for those first couple weeks, and then go from there. I'm in on Danny Woodhead. I like the price, especially in PPR. I know there's it might be a little more aggressive than some people, but Kyle Juszczyk's gone, Steve Smith's gone. Like, it seems like their whole tight end core is gone from the last season. There's just so many targets walked out the door, and obviously, we'll get to Macklin and Perriman and all these guys here in a minute, but, if he sees the Juszczyk targets plus, I mean, that could be 70, 80 targets, and, we've seen Danny Woodhead be an elite running back when healthy. 2 years ago was the number 3 running back in PPR, a top 10 guy in standard, so obviously he has the ability to be really productive, and that if that means a reduced role from Terrence West, well, maybe that's what happens. If this is a team that isn't very good and they're having to throw a lot, I could see a lot more Danny Woodhead on the field. So he's definitely a guy I'm interested in. I don't know that I'm going crazy to get him, but if he's sitting there for me, in the 4th round, 5th round, I don't hate taking him there.
Yeah, I mean, I get the upside with Woodhead. He just always seems to go like a round earlier than I'm willing to take him.
Yeah.
I just do think there's some risks with him. Again, he's 32 years old. He's coming off the torn ACL. He's in a brand new offense, and I don't like the fact that he's missing all this time with Joe Flacco in camp. All the camp time Flacco's missed. I don't think that helps.
Yeah. Yeah. I would. I think if you're in a full point PPR and you kind of want to use one of those running back slots, I'd much rather take Theo Riddick where he's going, or even, I mean, this is a little bit of a deeper league thing, but I really like Chris Thompson in Washington. I think, with the difference in ADP there and the fact that we don't really know what's going to happen with Rob Kelly or with Pirine there, not that Thompson's going to, be a 15 carry guy, but if he can get 6 to 8 carries and 3 to 4 catches a week, I think he's going to be really underrated.
Yeah.
Shane Vereen too.
Yeah,
Shane Vereen's a guy I've been taking a lot of.
Yeah, I'm kind of coming around to Shane Vereen being a thing with the Giants and not as much Paul Perkins, but that's a backfield I'm kind of curious to see over the next couple weeks, see how those snap counts go. Are you guys taking Carlos Hyde or Danny Woodhead in PPR?
Hyde for me.
Yeah, definitely Hyde.
Spencer Ware or Danny Woodhead?
Woodhead.
Yeah, probably Woodhead. That's close though.
Yeah, sounds like it's about the right range. He's going, after obviously Dalvin, Joe Mixon, Carlos Hyde, and then right before Spencer Ware, and then another round is like Gillislee, Abdullah, C.J. Anderson. So, depending on how you draft, he might make a ton of sense. Like if you lead receiver heavy, if you go running back heavy, you might be grabbing, Golden Tate, Jarvis Landry, Martavis Bryant, something like that, and he might be a guy that just kind of gets overlooked the way you develop your team, but he's a guy that I like, and I'm kind of excited to try and get some shares up for sure. Let's talk about those pass catchers, because we mentioned all those targets leaving town. Obviously, Jeremy Macklin's there. Mike Wallace, Mr. Top 20, top 30 receiver, got a lot of targets last year. Rashad Perriman's still there, and he's always injured, and I don't think he's very good, so he's not really a thing for me, but Damian, if you're looking at the Ravens receiving core, are you Macklin? Are you Wallace? Are you both in certain situations? Where are you at?
I can see the case for both. I'm probably closer to Macklin right now just because I think he's the guy that is more reliable in terms of we kind of earlier in his career he was more of a deep threat guy, and I still think he has that ability. But and maybe it's tough to separate from the fact that Alex Smith just wouldn't throw any route over 8 yards, so maybe that's why Macklin was such a underneath guy. But I do think that that's going to kind of lend itself to more volume and opportunity in PPR settings, with Wallace being kind of the over top guy. And while, I mean, if you're going to be kind of the touchdown or bust deep threat guy, kind of Joe Flacco's the quarterback you want to have, because it seems like 60% of his throws are just punts. So we'll see. But I think Macklin's a little bit safer. Wallace probably has the higher upside.
Yeah, I mean, Wallace is going in the middle of the 11th. Like, I'll take that value all day long. He's a guy that I think could get plenty of work. Macklin's a guy I like. Macklin's a guy that I could see value with, but he is also going kind of in the middle of the 7th round, and right after Emmanuel Sanders, Pierre Garçon, right before Eric Decker, Moncrief, Devontae Parker. Jared, does that feel like a correct range for Macklin for you?
Yeah, I think that's about right for Macklin. He'd be my bet to lead Ravens wide receivers in fantasy points this season, but I think Wallace is a better value for where he's going. Wallace finished 22nd last year in PPR points among wide receivers. He's been top 36 in 7 of his 8 NFL seasons now, and I don't see his role with the Ravens shrinking this season with all the pieces they lost.
Can you envision drafting both of them on the same team, or is it kind of one or the other?
I mean, I wouldn't say I wouldn't do it if they follow the right range, but It's also not an offense I want to invest that heavily in.
Yeah, definitely. Let's head up to Pittsburgh and talk about those Steelers. This team has a lot of potential. Obviously, they have LeVeon Bell, who is, the top 1 or 2 running backs, top 1 or 2 picks. Antonio Brown, if you pick receiver, he's probably the number 1 pick. But, there's a lot going on. Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger's home road splits, which we'll get to him here in a minute. But let's start with Le'Veon Bell. And Jared, he's holding out, hasn't come to camp yet. Are you starting to, get a little worried or a little hesitant about taking him if you say you have the 2nd overall pick?
I mean, it's on my radar. He's still my clear number 2 overall guy behind only David Johnson. I don't think Bell is going to hold out into the, regular season. I think the risk with it is, we've seen guys hold out all of training camp, come in, and week 1 they pull a hamstring because they're not in shape or whatever. So I think that's the risk. And of course, Bell already comes with the durability risks. He comes with some off-field risk. So to me, that's why David Johnson is the number 1 pick, but I still think Bell is the number 2 guy.
Yeah, I'm probably with you, Damian. What about you? Are you starting to get a little more, a little more red flags going up? Maybe you're considering taking Brown if you have the 102 in a PPR or something.
No, not at all. I think what Jared said about kind of the concern, with him coming back without getting a full, training camp and preseason under his belt, that's valid. But at the same time, I also think it also decreases the chance that he gets hurt in training camp or in preseason. So it's kind of a little bit of a trade-off. I think, it's almost like we see with a lot of, like LaDainian Tomlinson or Adrian Peterson would literally never play in the preseason for so many years. And they were always kind of ready to go when the season came about. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if the Steelers are going to be willing to pay him. We saw what Freeman just got, and I do think Bell is clearly a more proven and a better player. But at the same time, with we said, his injury history and the fact that they have a lot of money tied up in Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown and a few other pieces, it's just you don't know if it's going to be there. So we'll see, but I don't think he's going to be willing to basically, sit out on that franchise tag, and he'll be back.
Yeah, I'm guessing we'll see him probably for the week 4, week 3 preseason game. He'll run a little bit. He'll be fine. He's definitely a guy that I'm taking 2 overall. The return of Martavis Bryant. He's been cleared. He's practicing. He should be playing in these preseason games. If, Brown's there, Bell's there, what's the upside of Martavis Bryant as the 3rd option in this offense, Jared?
I mean, I think the upside's huge. I mean, for starters, I think this offense, the entire pie is big. I think this could be a top 5 offense, maybe even the best offense in the NFL this season if all these guys stay healthy. And I think there's enough targets to go around for Martavis Bryant. He saw a 20.8% target share during his 11 games back in 2015. If you give him that, let's call it 21% share on the 599 pass attempts the Steelers have averaged over the past 3 seasons, that's 125 targets for Bryant. And I think that's plenty for this guy. I mean, he's an absolute madman when he's on the field. He is averaging 17.3 yards per catch for his career, 14 touchdowns in 21 career games. So if he stays healthy, if he stays clean off the field, I think he can easily be a top 20, top 15 guy, even with Antonio Brown, maintaining that elite production.
Yeah, and the off the field stuff is definitely an issue. He's going in the end of the 4th, early 5th. Are you comfortable taking him there, Jared?
Yeah, that's about right where I'm going to start to consider him. He's another guy that I sort of like Woodhead. I wish I had a bit more of him, but he sometimes seems to go a little before I'm willing to consider him, because again there is a lot of risk with Bryant.
Yeah,
he's a guy I like to take if I have like 2 steady wideouts already on my roster, and getting Bryant as like a high upside wide receiver 3 I think is awesome.
Yeah, I think if you go like Jordy Nelson, Doug Baldwin, maybe you grab a running back or 2 running backs, in that range, and then he's your 5th overall. I could definitely see that being the case, and helping mitigate some of that risk. Damian, what about you? Are you in on Martavis at his current cost, and kind of what are your expectations for him heading into the season?
If you can get him outside of kind of the top 25 at receiver, I think it's definitely worth it. I might take Willie Snead over him, who's going in a similar range there, but I think once you get to, I take him over guys like Tyreek Hill and Dante Moncrief, just kind of as a reference point. And Bryant's a weird case, because for a guy who's so, I want to say dependent on the big play, because that's kind of how he gets most of his points. But for somebody who, relies on that, he's actually oddly consistent in the fact that kind of the regularity with which he just gets, 40-yard catches is pretty astonishing, because, for him, a bad game could be, 2 for 45, 2 for 50, which is still, 6-7 points. Like, you can live with that. And the upside being, he's going to get you, 150 and 2 scores. So most guys, when they don't have that big play, they don't really get you anything. But, he's basically a lock 50 yards anytime he's on the field.
Yeah, and we talked about Martavis being good as a 3rd. Jared, you said they could have the #1 offense. Is there going to be an opportunity for Juju, for Eli Rogers, for any of the other pass catchers to be a legit factor that you want to like buy in on, or is it just those are guys that maybe in best ball, maybe in DFS could make sense, but that's about it?
Yeah, I think best ball and DFS is what you're looking at. I think you're going to see other guys pop, whether it's Juju, Eli Rogers, Jesse James, might pop for a 2-touchdown game out of nowhere, but I don't see any of them becoming reliable weekly fantasy starters.
Damian, are you in agreement?
Yeah, I think we saw last year kind of how that rotating, cast of characters outside the big 2 really hurt the Steelers. They were throwing important passes to Kobe Hamilton, and that's never been the answer. So, I think the concern is that with how bad Ben is on the road, and with the fact that there's just going to be a lot of games where Bell gets 30 touches and Brown catches 9 passes, there's not enough to go around for everybody else. With any semblance of consistency, like Jared said, there's going to be a game here and a game there, but you're not going to be able to predict it.
Yeah, let's talk about Big Ben. Jared, hit us with those stats about his home versus road splits, because they're definitely eye-opening.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, last year, if you take just his home numbers, he would have been the quarterback 1 in fantasy football. He outscored everyone. If you look at his points per game numbers away from Heinz Field, he would have been quarterback number 25. So, not even someone you want to be starting in 2 quarterback leagues. And we've seen this home road thing go back, a few years now. So maybe it's a fluke, but the sample size is getting pretty big, where if I draft him, I'm going to feel, not so good starting him when he's on the road.
Yeah, and people will say, well, he didn't have Martavis. He had Martavis for stretches. He had Antonio Brown. I mean, there hasn't been a lot where all three guys, where it's been Ben with Martavis, with Bell, and with Brown. So maybe that changes, but I'm 100% with you. If I'm drafting Roethlisberger, like, I don't mind him at his price. Like, normally he's a guy that's, kind of where Matt Ryan is going, or, kind of in that, top 5, 6, 7 range. Now he's becoming a guy that, is interesting. Pulling up ADP. He's going at the end of the 9th, early 10th. Like, I would be very happy to take him there, but, like what I just said, I'm taking him, I'm insulating him with the help. And I was looking at some potential guys, Andy Dalton, who we obviously all talked about, Jameis Winston, Tyrod, Carson Palmer, Blake Bortles. I was looking at their potential matchups, and Andy Dalton has an amazing schedule when Ben is on the road, so you could literally have Dalton and Roethlisberger, and when Roethlisberger's at home, you play him at home, and when Roethlisberger's on the road, you play Dalton. The one caveat there is they both have Dalton has a week 6 bye, so that might throw a wrench in your plans. Matthew Stafford's another guy that has a pretty nice schedule. And doesn't actually, basically is playing every game that Roethlisberger is on the road. So that, if you're looking for basically 2 guys to pair, and you can get both those guys really late. So check that out on fakepigskin.com. But Jared, if you draft Roethlisberger, are you comfortable taking, a second quarterback to kind of play matchups?
Right, that's the thing. I mean, I don't like carrying 2 quarterbacks in, standard, say, 16-man fantasy rosters. If you go deeper, it's a bit easier to do, but I like just carrying 1 quarterback and sort of streaming playing matchups.
Yeah, and that's why we always end up with Dalton. Damian, what about you? Where are you at with Roethlisberger? And kind of, would you be comfortable having basically a second quarterback on your roster?
No, that opportunity cost is just too high, unless it is an MFL situation where you basically have to draft a second guy just for the bye week. In that case, then yeah, I'd love Ben because I know I'm going to get his best games. But in like a standard format, it's not worth it because you're still going to have to draft a good enough quarterback as your QB2 to feel confident in those weeks that Roethlisberger's on the road. So in order to do that, you're going to have to use basically 2 of your top 12 picks on QBs, and I don't like what that does to your team.
Yeah. Let's talk about the tight ends. Obviously, Eifert is the elite guy, but David Njoku, Jesse James, Ben Watson. Jared, is there anything other than maybe if you're streaming and there's a nice matchup, you throw a dart? But other than that, are any of these guys you're seriously considering as your tight end one?
No, not at all. I mean, actually sounds like Nick Boyle might be the guy in Baltimore, and that's not anything I want on my fantasy roster. The one guy I'm at least keeping an eye on is Seth DeValve in Cleveland, just because as much as I love Njoku, he's a rookie tight end. We know rookie tight ends don't usually do anything. Njoku's really young. He's only 21 years old. So I think DeValve is a guy who he's got size, he's got athleticism, 96th percentile SPARQ score last year. So interesting, but still, not someone I'm drafting outside of my last pick and it's 20-round best ball.
Yeah, I'm definitely DFS targets at best. I am keeping an eye on Ben Watson because the Baltimore tight end has been good, and he obviously had that one big year with Breeze, and then had the injury at missed all of last year. So, he's an older guy. We're not sure how he's going to rebound. I mean, Damian was talking about, Danny Woodhead returning. Ben Watson's, 5 years older. We'll see about him. Damian, what about you? Are you interested in, maybe the outlaw Jesse James?
Nope. This isn't a division I want to target for kind of fringe offensive players here. You have a lot of those games between the Ravens and the Steelers, or the Steelers and the Bengals that are 13-10, 10-7, just a lot of hard hitting, a lot of defense, a lot of turnovers. Not exactly. Go to the NFC South, or if you want high scoring games.
Yeah, get Austin Hooper.
Yep.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Jared. Tell everyone where they could follow you, read your work, check out your podcast, all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can check out the podcast and read some of my stuff on draftsharks.com, and my Twitter is @SmolaDS.
Yeah, Jared's a great follow. Obviously, smart dude. That's why we like to have him on the show. Once again, go to playdraft.com/fakepigskin. Deposit $5. Get Fake Pigskin Elite, our new premium service for the entire year, a $30 value. Plus, you get a free $3 entry fee. Like it's basically stealing, but do it anyway. It's worth it. We'll do some best ball. We'll do some DFS on play draft. If you don't know what best ball is or you have questions, there's a really good article up on Fake Pigskin now by Matt Cunningham talking about kind of the basics and letting you know what it is. And we've kind of touched on it tonight, but you get the best weeks from all your players, and there's not as much going through, okay, who do I start, who do I sit. You get to have all the fun of drafting without having all that in-season management. So definitely check that out. We'll have a ton of premium content going up on the site very, very soon. For Jared Smola, for Damian Dabrowski, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.